Are you the manager?
Yes. You need to leave. You need to leave. We're not serving you.
Hold on, guys. Okay.
We do not serve you.
Excuse me, but you did say that she needs to go back to her country. What is that?
Literally, Native Americans
Excuse
are from
me, this is what this whole world.
White people are not from this country. Don't serve her.
Yeah, you do not serve
Don't
her.
serve her racist ass.
You don't talk. No. Continue serving. Continue serving.
You need to leave. You're not a
No,
part of
no,
this.
no, no.
You need to leave. You're not a part of this.
You're
No.
racist.
No, you do not
You
come
just
in here
told-
and use the F word and swear and call me a bitch.
I never even said
I
that
said
word.
she is, and
I
you're not
never
a part
even
of it.
said that word.
So
You're
you
making
get out
stuff
of
up
here.
now.
I know. I said
No.
she is, and that's why she's leaving. So
Okay.
you will leave too.
No. This is going all over the internet. You don't know who I am. You told her to go back to her country where she's from.
That's assault. You
Yeah.
guys know that, right?
Yeah.
Where were you born?
Where were you born, America, bitch? Where are your ancestors from?
You're
They're
going-
not from this country.
You're going back to Mexico.
Bitch, you better go back to where you're from.
You just walked into her. Excuse me.
Hey, bitch, you just touched me.
Oh my
see?
God.
Yeah, you deserved it.
Oh my God.
In my opinion. Yeah, you pushed her and she smacked you. That was self-defense on her part.
Oh, she grabbed me.
Nope.
Please.
Alright, Shalom. I want to begin this lesson by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shah, Wahar Rakak Qudash, which in the ancient Hebrew tongue would be the correct names of the Heavenly Father, His beloved Son, and the Holy Spirit. I also would like to give double honors to my teachers, the head apostles and elders, a great millstone. Much due honors and respect to the sincere brethren out there that's also laboring in His work. And as always, I want to say Shalom to the believers, the Akim as well as the Akwad, which would be you brothers along with the sisters that subscribe to this truth as well. So yeah, just wanted to go into another quick lesson. Right now what you're witnessing is prophecy, beginning to be brought more and more to the forefront. And the things that was written and foretold here in the Holy Scriptures is now being made more and more manifest. Truth is now beginning to take center stage. And pretty much the vain opinions of you people out there and your outlook on things and what you might perceive to be truth or not, or believable, or the things you deem unbelievable is now beginning to take a back seat, man. All right, we're in a time where truth is finally taking root here on the planet Earth, which truth is very emphatic. Truth is somewhat of an exclamation point, and there's nothing you can do to offset truth. You can attempt to divert truth or suppress the truth or even go as far as demonizing the truth, yet truth will prevail, which when you consider truth is symbolic to light, Now light is all an effort to expose the things in the dark. You might assess a certain thing, but you might come to the wrong conclusion in your assessment. But once further examined, or once you shed light on a particular thing, then the very thing that you're assessing is going to expose itself. And that's what I wanted to touch on in this lesson, the fact that the so-called white man and his hatred, for the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, which will be Jacob, actually proves that you're Esau. See? Matter of fact, let's go ahead and get into this lesson. This is the book of Genesis, the 27th chapter. In the 41st verse, it says, and Esau hated Jacob. See? And Esau hated Jacob. Now you might say, well, hold up. This is an isolated situation right here betwixt two brothers. And this hatred was only reserved for this time period. Well, when you go to the book of Ezekiel, right? The 35th chapter. In the 5th verse, it says, because thou hast had a perpetual hatred, see, and hast shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword, see, by the force of the sword, in the time of their calamity, in the time that their iniquity had an end. Well, the scriptures is framing that hatred. That hatred that Esau had for Jacob is a perpetual hatred. Now, when you click on the definition for this word, perpetual, right? It says long duration, see, long duration, antiquity, See, forever and ever, everlasting, evermore. See, perpetual, old, ancient world. See, ancient time, long time of past. See, of future. So that proves that that hatred that Esau had towards his brother Jacob was not an isolated hatred, only reserved for that time period betwixt those two brothers. You got to remember, Jacob and Esau was the progenitor of nations, okay? Jacob being the forefather of the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, and the so-called white people you see here today walking the planet Earth being the offspring of Esau, see? So that hatred wasn't designated to that time period. That wasn't an isolated hatred right there. That was a perpetual hatred. And we read the definition right there, see? A future, forever, always, see? Always, meaning the seeds of those two particular men, all right, their lineage, their generation, their bloodline, those two particular nations will always bump heads, man. There will always be a hatred there, see? It says continuous, see? Continuous. Matter of fact, let's look up this word continuous right here. Continuous, it says forming an unbroken whole without interruption. Yeah, there was never a time where there was peace between Jacob and Esau. And when you take a glimpse in the history proves that, So when you consider Esau, the so-called white man, and his hatred for you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, which would be Jacob, that proves the two parties right there, man. See? So when you go right back here to Genesis, the 27th chapter, and again, the 41st verse, and Esau hated Jacob, all right? When you see the so-called white man, show his disdain for our people, that proves who Esau is, man, all right? Because we know that the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans are Jacob, right? So when you have a certain people to show hatred for that people, then this means one thing: you must be Esau. Why? Because again, we read in the scriptures, and Esau hated Jacob. See that? Now you have a lot of Jakes out there, these Negro-only Israelites, who like to frame Israel as only being so-called Negroes and the Latin tribes and the so-called Native Americans would be excluded. They wouldn't be numbered amongst the children of Israel. Well, what you saw in the opening clip was an Edomite showing her disdain and her hatred for a so-called Native American, man. See? Which, when you go into history, you will see that the so-called white man not only expressed his hatred, that disdain and that perpetual hatred was not only on display or geared towards the so-called Negroes, but as well as the Latin tribes and as well as the Native Americans, man. You'll be hard pressed to find any of these so-called Negro-only Israelites who have a feel for history, when it's well documented that you had the Indian Removal Act of 1920, or if you ask these Negro-only Israelites, what was the Trail of Tears all about? Or Wounded Knee? That was pretty much the so-called white man, Esau, showing his hatred for Jacob, man. That wasn't some random act right there, And as you witnessed in the opening clip, where you had, this Edomite chick, she pretty much was attempting to offend. She was showing despitefulness towards the Native American, the so-called Native American girl. And she was telling her the same thing. She was echoing the same sentiment that she have spoken against so-called Negroes. Go back to your homeland. If you don't like it here, won't you go back to Africa? Or they tell Issachar, go back to Mexico. Well, here it is. She's telling this so-called Native American to go back to your land, which that shows you the hypocrisy of these devils, man. They came over here and they hijacked this land from the natives. See, when you go into Christopher Columbus, which that was a devil, that was a so-called white man, where he committed damn near genocide against the so-called natives, man. You know, when you read the memoirs of Christopher Columbus, he wrote that he couldn't lay his sword down for 1 hour. And he killed up to 1 million natives in a 4-year campaign, which was 4 million natives slaughtered at the hand of Christopher Columbus, man, Cristobal Colon, which was where an Edomite. And that was the hatred, you know, of Esau being displayed against his brother Jacob. See? So real quick, when you go right here to the book of Psalms, the 10th chapter, starting at the 12th verse, it says, arise, O Lord, O Yahweh, lift up thine hand. And that's the spirit. That Native American girl lifted up her hand and smacked the shit out that Edomite chick, man. You know, which we look at everything through spiritual lenses. That was spiritual right there, you know, which we know this hand right here is symbolic to Yahweh Shah. All right, the Lord is going to lift Yahweh Shah and send forth his son as the redeemer of the children of Israel, and in particular the elect of the nation of Israel. And when our Lord returns, he's going to come to subdue his enemies, man. The main enemy being the so-called white man. And that's outlined in the book of Psalms, the 83rd chapter. All right. It says, arise, O Lord, O Yahweh Bashem Yahweh, lift up thine hand, forget not the humble. See, forget not the humble. Wherefore doeth the wicked contend with the Most High. Right, because when you come up against us, you coming up against the Most High. Matter of fact, let's further prove that, and we'll go back. This is the book of Galatians, the 6th chapter, in the 7th verse. It says, be not deceived, the Most High is not mocked. Yeah, you know, when you hear these stories of, you know, these so-called white people, you know, they might have blackface. You know, you might have certain stories where these devils go on racial rants. You know, they might speak ill towards the children of Israel, speak lofty concerning oppression, you know, and what you saw in the opening clip, you know, telling Jake to go back to where you come from. Here it is, you put hell on us for hundreds and hundreds of years, and you're not satisfied with blood, man. You know, you're not content with overthrowing us as a people, you know, pillaging us, raping our women, you know, killing our babies, man. You know, you had a thing known as gator bait. Well, for sport, these devils throw babies, infants, in chicken coops and shit like that, man. They'll keep them in chicken coops overnight, and the next day they'll throw them over to goddamn alligators, man. And that was for sport. They actually got postcards commemorating that, man. You know, you might have a flyer, you know, that's promoting a concert, okay, a certain concert on a certain date. Well, you know, these devils, they had gator bait, man, where they was killing children, little Negro babies for sport, you know, and they'll send out postcards for you to come and enjoy the festivities, man. All right. That history, you know, where these devils have shown they're bloodthirsty, they lust for the blood of the children of Israel. And yet, when you fast forward to this day, they're not even satisfied with that. See, they have to antagonize you and despise you, you know, by calling you names. And these devils, they set up these elaborate schemes in the form of legislation and laws to keep Jake in further derision. See? So that's why our Lord is going to step in on our behalf and make inquisition on behalf of the children of Israel. And Yahweh Shai is coming to redeem us, man. And in that act, he's going to destroy you so-called white people. See? Again, it says, be not deceived. The Most High is not mocked. Yeah, so when you mock us, everything you have done to us, that's a direct attack against Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. All right? Be not deceived. The Most High is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. See that? So when you go back here to Psalms, the 10th chapter, again, the 13th verse, wherefore doeth the wicked contend with the Most High. See? So when you mock, you know, Israel, your ill dealings and your treacherous acts towards the nation of Israel, well, guess what? That's geared towards the Most High. See? Wherefore doeth the wicked contend with the Most High. He hath said in his heart, thou would not require it. See? Thou hast seen it, for thou beholdest mischief and spite. See? Let's read this again. Thou hast seen it, for thou beholdest mischief and spite. Yeah, the Lord see the mischievous acts of Esau and the spite, you know. Now, when you go into that word spite, it means to deliberately annoy or offend someone. See? That's how you show spite to someone. You deliberately annoy or offend them. See? So this is what Esau has shown towards his brother Jacob. Besides the shedding of his blood, he showed spite to him. He deliberately annoy and offend him. And that's what you just saw in the opening clip. See, again, it says, thou hast seen it. See? It says, for thou beholdest, see, for thou beholdest mischief and spite, to requite it with thy hand, the poor committeth himself unto thee, thou art the helper of the fatherless. See that? So the Lord have beheld the mischief and spite. And again, that word spite, when you look it up, it pretty much means to deliberately annoy or offend someone. And that's what you saw in the opening clip. This Edomite chick, she was getting off on badgering that Jake, man. And that proved that the so-called Native Americans are Israelites as well, all right? Now I want to pull up a little information further proving that not only are the so-called Negroes as well as the Latin tribes are Israelites, but the so-called Native American Indians as well. They will be numbered amongst the children of Israel, all right? Which a lot of times, you know, the Native Americans and Seminole Indians, they get lost in the shuffle. You know, it's obvious, you know, this is if you have a mental capacity, if you will. It's obvious to see that, for an example, the so-called Puerto Ricans would be numbered amongst the children of Israel. You know, you go in these different hoods, different ghettos and projects. You have the Latin tribes, you know, so-called Puerto Ricans right there with the so-called Negroes. You know, they pretty much marry one another. They run with one another, you know, especially on the East Coast, you know. But a lot of times the natives get lost in the shuffle, if you will, you know, which me and the brothers, maybe a week ago or so, we did a sit down where through the spirit, we went in a thorough breakdown, you know, on how the Latin tribes, you know, as Israelites, you know, the so-called Mexicans, and, you know, Puerto Ricans, right? But when it comes to the so-called Native Americans, you know, you have people that have a hard time accepting that, which I don't understand why. You know, we just mentioned, you know, Christopher Columbus, you know, Andrew Jackson. You know, you could research, for an example, the Indian Removal Act of 1920, or you can go into Wounded Knee. You know, all these different treaties they broke, you know, these different times where they slaughtered these different villages amongst the Native Americans, man. You know, the Trail of Tears, man, right? So again, that was the so-called white man showing his hatred towards Jacob, proving that he must be Esau. So real quick, let me pull up this information right here, and this is from CNN. It says the forgotten minority in police shootings, right? Let's find out who this minority is, man. That's a so-called Native American right there, man. Which clearly, if you had a spirit, you can see that this is Jake. See that? He's protesting. He's doing the same thing that you so-called Negroes is known for, all right? You know, these different protests and these rallies, all in effort to quell that hatred that the so-called white man and injustice that this man has shown towards you. Well, guess what? It's not only the so-called Negroes who cry out against the injustice of the so-called white man. You have the Latin tribes, the so-called Mexicans, which when you go into like the 60s and 70s, simultaneously with the Black Power movement, right? You had the Chicano movement, man. See? Which was driven by the so-called Mexicans and the Latin tribes. See? Right here, these are the so-called Native Americans. See? The forgotten minority in police shootings. It says allegations of excessive police use. Matter of fact, you know what? Yeah, I can't skip this. It says Native Americans are killed, see, in police encounters at a higher rate than any other racial or ethnic group. And that includes so-called Negroes, man. Okay, according to these statistics. And even if they skewed, it still put the Native Americans in the same ballpark as you so-called Negroes, man. Again, the scripture said we would be oppressed together. And in relation to this lesson, right, Esau hate his brother Jacob, man. The so-called white man, and his hatred towards Jacob proves that he's Esau, but it also proves that we are Jacob. We the Israelites, man. See? So the so-called Negro is not the only one with cases of unarmed so-called black man being shot down by cops. We read right here, man. Again, Native Americans, see, are killed in police encounters at a higher rate than any other racial or ethnic group. See, let's read a little into this. It says allegations of excessive police use of force against African Americans. See that inside the spirit work? Against African Americans have captured the nation's attention, see, in recent years. Now, there's a reason for that, because the so-called African American here in America and throughout the world is of the tribe of Judah. And if you understand the scriptures in relation to the tribes, the tribe of Judah would be the head tribe, meaning they would be the figurehead, if you will, the face of Israel. So whenever something happens, it's usually going to be Judah, that's going to be thrust into the forefront. For an example, when you go into these different period pieces, these different movies that's centered around slavery, usually it's going to be centered around Judah. See? But that doesn't offset or in no wise should cancel out the fact that you had the Latin tribes, the Northern Kingdom, that went into slavery as well, man. It's only more publicized through Judah. See, and that's what this article is saying. See, again, it says allegation of excessive police use of force against African Americans have captured the nation's attention in recent years. But there's another group, see, whose stories you're less likely to hear about, and that's the spirit. Because, again, Judah is the head tribe, right? So they would get the brunt, if you will, of the publicity. See? It says Native Americans are killed in police encounters at a higher rate than any other racial or ethnic group, according to data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Yet, rarely do these deaths gain the national spotlight. And again, there's a reason for that, man. And see, Jake, in their simplicity, they like to exclude the natives from being Israelites. And it's because they don't research, man. They don't see that we are all oppressed together. We all have one common enemy. And as you saw in the opening clip, that Edomite, she proved two things. She proved herself to be Esau. And it also proved that the Native Americans was Jacob, man. For an example, when the last time you seen a video surface where these devils is telling a so-called Arab to go back to his land? And it seemed as if they would have more, it would be more of a driving force, more motivation, right? To tell the Arabs to go back. Was not the Arabs, the so-called Arabs, responsible for the Twin Towers? Supposedly, allegedly, all right, these different terrorist attacks. Was it not Al-Qaeda and the Taliban? So why don't you see videos surfacing where these devils telling them to go back to their land? Huh? See, that would be more plausible. That would be more understandable, man. You can understand that. Well, where you guys responsible for blowing up the Twin Towers, go back to your land. See? Or when the last time you seen them telling these gooks, these so-called Chinese, to go back to their land, man? No, they only telling Israel that, man, because they have a perpetual hatred for the children of Israel. You only hear them tell so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans that. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, man. We reading right here where they actually stretched forth their hand and shed the blood of Israelites. See? See, it says the lack of attention has prompted some advocates to start social media campaigns, right? Oh, let me see, media campaigns. Oh, okay. Reminiscent of Black Lives Matter. See that? Reminiscent of Black Lives Matter, man. So you see where the spirit is pretty much lumping all the tribes together. See that? It said Native American people are basically invincible to most of the people in the country, said Daniel Sheehan, general counsel for the Lakota People's Law Project. For every 1 million Native Americans, an average of 2.9 of them died annually from 1999 to 2015 as a result of a legal intervention, according to a CNN review of CDC data broken down by race. The vast majority of these deaths were police shootings, see, but a few were attributed to other cases, including manhandling. The mortality rate is 12% higher than for African Americans and 3 times the rate of whites. See that? Even though the annual rate of death is higher, the number of Native American deaths is relatively small. An estimated 22 Native Americans and Native Alaskans died at the hand of police in 2016. Yeah, so you get the point, all right? It's not only the so-called Negroes over here that's feeling the brunt, the hatred, you know, the wrath, all right, of their enemy, Esau. It's the Latin tribes, the so-called Mexicans, you know, the so-called Haitians and Jamaicans and Cubans and Guatemalans, as well as the so-called natives, man, which a lot of these different tribes, they're mingled amongst each other. You know, you have guys that say, well, where is Neptali? Well, guess what? They look like Judites, man. You actually got Asher that look like a so-called Negro, man. All right? And it's not so much about the carnal approach. It's spiritual, man. And again, if you find yourself, you know, being harassed by the cops, you know, the cops or certain situations where you being profiled, you know, pretty much you feel the ills, if you will, of being here in America, being in Babylon the Great. You're an Israelite, man. All right, you are under the curses. See? And on the flip side, when you see these devils showing their hatred towards the so-called Negro, Latino, and Native American, right? Then that proves that they are none other than Esau. So y'all just want to touch on that, Lord willing. It was edifying. Till the next time I say shalom.